The last point is don't forget that economics is a social science, so it's sometimes called the queen of the social sciences because it tends to have its fingers in a lot of other social scientific phenomena. But it's important to keep in mind that ultimately these other areas have something to say about human behavior as well, right? Human and social behavior. So it could be sociology, it could be psychology. The closest one possibly I can think of in terms of allied subjects is either psychology or political science. Psychology, integrated economics is today called behavioral economics, and political science related to economics is called political economy or political economics. And both of these areas are very important subfields within economics, and they are routinely informed by its allied disciplines, which is political science and psychology, respectively.
Since you brought this up, okay, I would just like to ask, because you mentioned something about political science, so how is this going to translate or map out to helping you to form policies?
For starters, I think because of the mathematical edifice that a lot of economists are trained in, and the importance of logical thinking through our theories and our arguments, you become a very disciplined thinker. So you're able to think through and dissect arguments in a very logical and systematic fashion. So that puts you in good state for many things. In fact, economics is the most, this is a little different in Singapore, where law is actually an undergraduate degree, but in the US, it's a graduate degree, and economics is the most popular major to get into law, even more so than pre-law. And the reason is because economics forces their students to think through arguments in a logical fashion, and that's exactly what you have to do when you have to build an argument in a court of law. So that's one kind of a side benefit, if you will, of how economists, the benefit of how economists think about the world, which is you approach things in a rigorous and logical fashion. So I do that now as a policymaker for part of my time, and as a policymaker, you have to bring across arguments for why you think a given policy is important. And economics clothes you, I think, with a lot of tools to make those arguments, both from a theoretical perspective, why you would rule out one versus another policy, for instance, but also in being able to evaluate the empirical evidence that is out there, to think about why it is that you may choose to support one type of policy versus another, because the evidence, at least as brought forth by research, by analysis, statistical analysis, as well as experimental analysis of the data, tend to lean in favor of one versus another.
All right. So am I right to say that economics is a good discipline to have as a policymaker, but it is not necessarily that you have to graduate with an economics degree?
Yeah, I mean, policymakers don't all have economics degrees, but what I'll say is this. After I finished my undergraduate degree, I had a decision to make. I was very interested in political science as well as economics. And I had a decision to make on whether I would want to pursue a PhD in either political science or in economics. And my mentor at the time, who was an academic, she told me that, if you choose political science, you can never go back to economics. But if you choose economics, you will be armed with enough tools that you can always take on political science questions. So the reason why I ended up choosing economics was because it had it offered the best, at least among the social sciences, Swiss Army knife for thinking about policy questions, right? So you don't have to have an economics degree, but because of the way that economics trains you in terms of how you approach a problem, in terms of how you think about phenomena in the world, it trains you to at least have that basis for thinking about policy questions, and then everything else you build on it, right? So I talked about another allied subjects. One of them is history. So you can always pick up the history behind any given policy or to understand the kind of historical institutional setting whereby you are proposing a given policy change without necessarily being a historian by training. You can just read that up, right? Of course, historians have other skill sets, but importantly, you are able to bring to bear historical fact on a policy question without necessarily being a historian by training. It's much harder to bring economic ideas and theories and tools to a policy question when you don't have economics training as a background.